It was another quiet morning in Festive Road. At number 52, Mr. Benn thought he heard some laughter, and he looked out of his window. He saw Karen juggling with 3 balls. A boy balancing. Then he saw the group of children who were laughing. In the middle was Julian, wearing a funny mask. Mr. Benn watched for a while and then decided to go for a walk. Mr. Benn was on his way to the special costume shop, the shop which adventures could start from. Inside the shop, he stood and looked at the strange costumes and at once saw the one that made him laugh. As if by magic, the shopkeeper appeared. "Good morning," he said. "Would you like to try on the clown suit, sir?" Mr. Benn said that he would love to, and taking the clown's clothes, he went to the door in the corner of the shop, the door of the fitting room. Once in the room, he changed from his own clothes He didn't spend a long time looking at himself, but turned to the other door of the fitting room, the one which could lead to adventures. Mr. Benn walked through the door, wondering if he would come into a circus ring. To his surprise, he found himself in an open landscape, beside a little car. He knew at once that the car was for him. It could only be a clown's car. Before long, Mr. Benn was driving the car gently along the road. Everything was going very smoothly until Mr. Benn was about to go round a bend. Then the car started to behave very oddly. At the same time, Mr. Benn could see a long line of trucks parked along the road in front of him, brightly painted circus trucks. There was just room for the clown's car to drive past. At the front of the queue of trucks stood all the circus people with their backs to Mr. Benn. The little car made such a din that everybody turned to look. The car stopped with a bang. And Mr. Benn fell out. Everybody laughed. They made Mr. Benn feel quite welcome, and they asked him to help them with the circus for a while. "If we ever get to the next town," said a voice, and everybody became quiet again and turned to look the other way. For the first time, Mr. Benn saw why they were all stopped. A bridge they should have crossed had fallen down, and they couldn't go on. The circus folk were beginning to argue about the bridge. The strong man wanted to fill the gap with huge stones. The others told him it would only stop the river flowing. The tightrope walker wanted to put a rope across and balance everything over. But they'd never manage with the elephants. The conjurer said that he could make pieces of wood and stones balance for them to cross, but nobody thought that that would be safe. Everybody was suggesting things which they did in their circus acts. The stilt man wanted to make extra long stilts for everyone, but that wouldn't get trucks or equipment across. "What do you think we should do?" asked the ringmaster. "Well," said Mr. Benn, "you all work together to make a good circus. Well, I think you should all work together to make a good bridge." They all agreed. When the wood started to arrive, the ringmaster asked how they should build it. "If we build it on the side, we can make sure it's strong enough," said Mr. Benn. "Then we can gradually slide it into place." "But surely," said the ringmaster, "it'll fall in the gap before it reaches the other side." "Build the bridge longer than we need it. The extra will balance it." The bridge was started and gradually began to be pushed across the gap. "It would be very useful to have someone on the other side to help it into place," said Mr. Benn. The circus cowboy, who did rope tricks, used his lasso. He threw it and fastened it onto the rock on the other side of the gap, pulled it tight and fixed it. The tightrope walker had no trouble in getting across. Then the trapeze artist went over as well. All this time, more wood was being brought, and the bridge went on growing and growing. The stilts man put on his longest stilts and stood down in the gap to help the bridge over. So the work went on building onto the road end of the bridge, and then everyone pushing the bridge further across. At last, it reached the other side. Everyone had played their part, and the bridge was a success. The first person to cross the bridge was Mr. Benn in his little car, still playing its tricks. Then came the whole circus procession. The trucks, the elephants, horses, everything. Once across the bridge, the procession continued happily to the next town, where they were going to put up the big top, the circus tent. The circus started with the Parade of the Stars. Mr. Benn, of course, drove his little car. The first act was a balancing act. Mr. Benn loved it when lots of things were balanced, one on top of the other. The second act was a magician who suddenly appeared. He looked very familiar, but Mr. Benn couldn't remember seeing him at the bridge. The magician made a ball disappear from under one box and appear under another. Then he held up a vase of flowers and made that completely vanish. Next, said the magician, I would like to make a real person vanish, and he asked for someone to help him. Mr. Benn drove into the ring. The audience laughed. The magician pointed to a large box. Step into there, sir, and you will vanish, he said. Mr. Benn stepped into the box. And just as he'd expected, he found that he'd stepped back into the changing room of the shop. He took a last look at himself in his clown's clothes and then changed back into his own things. Back in the shop, Mr. Benn returned the clothes. You're a good magician, he said to the shopkeeper. We can all do something, sir, smiled the man. Mr. Benn was about to go when he remembered he still had the red nose. I nearly forgot, he said. That's all right, sir, said the man. Perhaps you'd like to keep it. Thank you, said Mr. Benn. Back in Festive Road, everything was quiet with people going about their business. There was just one group of children balancing on stilts and laughing. At his door, Mr. Benn took the red nose from his pocket and thought of the shopkeeper. How kind, he thought. It's just what I needed to help me remember.